We'll start. Welcome, everyone. I am Councillor Hugh Mason, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development. Housekeeping. The usual. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lift. Assemble by the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the University's Park building. To comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building. The meeting is being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Good afternoon, Mr. Brown. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Everyone speaking will be on camera. Members of the press and public, were there any, are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones? It's not so much for our benefit, but for the benefit of the one or two people who might actually be watching remotely. Remember to switch them off when you have finished speaking. We normally go with the introductions. We'll go around the table. I'm Hugh Mason. I'm the chairman of this, no, I'm not chairman. I'm the chairman of the meeting, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development.
My name is Judith Smythe, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Councillor Raymond Dent, Copner Ward.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Ian Maguire, the Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
Good afternoon, Lucy Howard, Head of Planning Policy.
Afternoon, Rachel Scott, Principal Planning Policy Officer.
Karen Martin, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. There are no deputations for this meeting. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Simon Bosher and Councillor George Fielding. The first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members have declarations of interest? No. Right. We come on to item 3, changes to the national planning policies, which are pages 3 to 28 in your pack of papers. Lucy, it's yours.
Thank you. As Councillor Mason said, I'm here to update you on proposed national changes by the new government. The item is to note rather than action, as Portsmouth City Council's comments on the NPPF consultation have already been submitted to the government. There is Appendix 1, which sets out the response, and Appendix 2 is a table that goes through proposed changes and the impact they will have on the City Council, particularly in regards to the local plan. With all of this, with all the wise words that go into the report, the main thing to remember is that as long as we submit the local plan for examination within 1 month of the new NPPF, then we will be examined under the December 2023 NPPF and will simply have to commit to an early review. So all the proposed changes will not be relevant to us. And the latest word on the street on that is that the new NPPF is expected to be published on the last day that Parliament sits, which is the 19th of December. So we have a month from then to submit the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. From what you can see of the new NPPF, what import will the changes have for us in the medium term?
First of all, they don't, as I said, they don't change the plan. So in the short term, none. In the medium term, all our neighbours, I would say, are worried about the new standard methodology because it puts the housing need numbers up. However, I don't think this should be a concern to Portsmouth going forward. We don't meet the original need number, which is 897, so we're certainly not going to be able to meet the new number, which is 1098. So the shortfall increases from 217 to 418, but we nevertheless, we We have a constrained island geography, and in our considered opinion, based on hard evidence, we can achieve no more than 680 homes a year, which is the target set in the plan. Thank you.
If I may, Councillor, add to that, that is entirely right for the plan making process. Of course, the changes to policy also affect your development management team, the decision making activity, including that of the planning committee. If the new NPPF is published on the 19th of December, as has been suggested by some, while there are transitional arrangements for it to come into play for certain things, such as submitting and updating your local plan, it will likely come into immediate effect for decision making. There's obviously a number of changes, several pages of changes, which we've detailed in the report, which may influence decision making as we go forward. They're largely focused about increasing the presumption in favour of, in particular, residential development, but also economic growth development. So there's no radical step change. There isn't something that, frankly, Portsmouth would have resisted before in principle and now wouldn't, or wouldn't and now would. Portsmouth has always been a very pro-development city in principle, so we're ahead of the curve on that basis. So I do not anticipate any dramatic changes to decisions. There will be greater weight given in certain elements, so that could impact, but no dramatic changes anticipated in the recommendations we'll be making to Planning Committee or applying in our own decision making. I would just touch on the slight absurdity, your choice of words medium term. The Minister has already talked about the next set of changes to the NPPF that they want to look at in 2025, including potentially national development management policies, which would make a big change to how we structure. Again, unlikely to really make any differences to the decisions we make, but it would be utilising national policy rather than local policy per se. So while this is a big change, actually we've got another one on the horizon within the next 9-10 months coming as well. So in the medium term, well, frankly, I'd call that short term, so maybe 2 or 3 more national planning policy frameworks to deal with. So as always, the only thing I can guarantee you is more uncertainty from national planning guidance.
We live in a period of perpetual change. Councillor Smythe.
2 related questions, please. I mean, the fact that the new MPPF is likely to put a greater emphasis on greater numbers of housing based on housing need. Do you think that'll mean that the inspector, when he or she looks at our plan, which I'm assuming will have been put in by the 19th of, by a month after the 19th of December, do you think it means nevertheless that he or she will be more anxious for us to raise our housing target, our housing target? And I have a related question to follow on.
Yeah, thank you. As I've said, as long as we submit the plan in time, the new target doesn't affect us. But my experience of examinations in a time of change is that the inspector will want to future-proof it, and so he will make, I think he will make references to the new NPPF. But it's not as important to us as it is for other local authorities. I mean, look at how the housing figures have risen on the Isle of Wight and in Winchester. Those are really quite dramatic, and they have green fields. Our figure has risen quite modestly, and we don't have green fields. So I don't think it will have a major impact on our examination.
That brings me very nicely to my other question. We don't have green fields, but we have a small number of very, very highly valued green open spaces. When I talk to people in the street about the plan and about housing growth, a lot of them are, against any other new development. That's not reasonable position to take, but the emotion behind that is to do with the loss of open space. Is there any fear that the new government policies would make us have to reconsider the safeguards we put in for the green space that we do have?
I don't think so. There is such a shortage of open space in the city, and we've strengthened our safeguarding of existing open spaces in the plan, because for the first time ever we've got local green spaces, and that gives some of the really special open spaces in the city the same level of protection as Greenbelt. So Southsea Common, Baffins Pond, College Park, you know, we really have upped the level of protection so that they can't be built on. And the open spaces which we didn't consider to be special enough to be open green spaces, local green spaces, they are still protected as well. So I don't think people need to worry on that score.
That's really reassuring. Some of the worries they have are based on the different treatment that's going to be given to the existing green belt in areas that do have green spaces around them, which we don't. And that's, I think, a bit of a cause of worry. And of course, my ward consists of a good half of the common, and you know, it's an extremely valued space, and people do get very worried about losing bits of it. But the fact that Greenbelt is being reconsidered in some areas doesn't affect our green spaces.
No, it doesn't. I think the government has managed to confuse itself and confuse other people. I understand with the green belt, grey belt thing, I understand what they are trying to do, because not all green belt, I think, should be protected. There's obvious areas of green belt which are of dubious worth. So I think they're doing it for the best reasons, but they have managed to confuse people. And people, we use a lot of terminology, and when you talk about local green spaces and you talk about green belt, people will just hear the word green. And so they will worry, and people really do cherish their local green spaces. We all do.
Thank you very much. I think if anybody is listening, that should be reassuring to them.
I think in St Jude Ward we have the whole of Southsea Common. Yes. We haven't sold any of it off yet. Strangely enough, we also have the sea forts. But that's another story.
We're very proud of both of them.
Indeed. So following on that, that we've designated local green spaces, could you outline the level of protection which we are now able to give to those spaces?
I'll start, but probably hand over to Ian. So it's the same protection as Greenbelt. So in order to develop on a local green space, once it's dedicated, you have to demonstrate exceptional circumstances, which Ian will now explain.
So the test is actually very special circumstances. The terminology is quite important. It's backed up by a lot of case law. Local green spaces have their own designation process. It's described and was being carefully examined through a topic paper that supports the local plan to identify what are those very special ones, as Lucy has just described for us. They are therefore then protected from effectively any development that is considered to not be appropriate development. The list of appropriate developments is very short, includes things like, because they are directly taken from Greenbelt, so includes certain things associated with agriculture, for example, which won't come up on our local green spaces. But in effect, it's any development that has a demonstrable adverse impact on the openness of those local green spaces. As has been said, probably the most unhelpful word in this whole area is green. A local green space, a green belt, can be entirely tarmacked and still do all the job that it's supposed to do. Many local green spaces in Portsmouth, for example, are a very notable mix of green trees, grass, play equipment, sports courts, multi-use games areas, even a bit of parking. All of these things can make up a local green space, so it can be very ungreen, but one of the key characteristics will be the openness, the lack of built form buildings on those sites, and that is what local green space seeks to resist. It seeks to keep those spaces open. It doesn't go to biodiversity. It's irrelevant to the green belt, and local green space doesn't go to landscape value, doesn't go to historic value in its own right. It goes to the protecting of historic settlement boundaries for green belt, obviously not relevant for green space, but a lot of the things that people actually consider when you're talking about green belt and equally applicable to urban green spaces as is relevant to Portsmouth are actually not the things that the man on the street understandably thinks about when you say a green space. It doesn't matter, as I say, if it has any habitat or biodiversity value to be defined in these issues. That's not what we're judging. We're simply judging, are they open spaces in the city, in this place, that are going to be that are considered to be special by the communities and are, you know, capable of being understood as such. So there's a long list in the city to supplement those already created in the Milton Neighbourhood Forum plan.
Councillor Dent, any?
No, all my questions have already been answered.
Well, I mean, I think we've been quite pleased with and proud of some aspects of the draft local plan. Is there any reason why we should be fearful of for example, the parts of it that are about biodiversity, about back boxes, swift boxes, about deep paving and the other things that we have thought carefully about putting in and would want to maintain? Is there anything about the new policies that you think threaten any of those kind of basic concepts that are different from what would have gone into a local plan done 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the merit and justification for the policies are evidence driven, so that evidence is robust and well produced. I'm proud of the work the team has done underpinning that. The only risk I see, and it is a very light one, so I really don't want this to be sort of the final takeaway from this conversation, is that obviously there is a very, very heavy push from government to get more development. The major constraint on development in Portsmouth is viability. The sale values of houses and employment space in Portsmouth is abnormally low for the South East. The cost of developing is, however, the same as most other places in the South East. Overall, therefore, viability is very poor. The things we've loaded onto this development, back boxes, swift boxes, etc., all add to the cost of development. They're tiny numbers, they don't make much difference at all. But as government is pushing above and beyond all other things, we do need to get growth, we do need to get development. That does put a greater emphasis on the development as a product outweighing perhaps harms, including non-policy compliance. So, you know, that does, if the scheme viability requires them to, I won't say cut corners, but let's say rationalise some policy areas, you might, from a delivery point of view, start losing some of the nice-to-have elements of development to make schemes viable and deliverable in the city. But that's a development management decision a couple of years down the line when we're looking at things, and the world will have turned a few times, and as I say, we'll probably have a couple of MPPFs under our belt by then, so I wouldn't be too unduly concerned about it. And we're fully aware of this, and we've obviously done the viability work for the plan as a whole, and we are satisfied that it is a legitimate plan and can deliver the growth described within it and the policy objectives placed upon it.
Finally, I mean, I would also worry about losing good design and good townscape design and making nice places to live as communities and making those work well. But thank you for your reassurance there anyway.
Thank you, Lucy, for your report. It is noted. We now come on to agenda item 4, which is the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan. Gillian.
Yeah, thank you. Me again. So again, this is a report for noting and it's not a decision. The action plan has already been published as part of our core document library to support the local plan. It is a backward-looking historical document based on the period 2019 to 2022. It was required because of our under-delivery on housing. We only achieved 38% against the target. The main issue here is that because our local plan is out of date, our requirement for housing becomes the standard method, which is, as we've just been saying, completely unachievable. The main reasons delivery was so low was, one, the pandemic, two, nutrient neutrality, lack of land supply, and as Ian's just been talking about, poor viability. I'd like to stress it was not due to poor performance by development management. The single thing that we need to do in order to improve performance under the housing delivery test is progress our local plan and adopt it with an achievable housing target so that we're no longer chasing an unachievable housing need figure. We need to work on supply with our housing and economic land availability assessment and our brownfield land register. We need to support new council housing endeavours and also endeavours by Ravelin. Continuous development to development management with successful recruitment and retention, training plan and staff benefits, and continue with our interim nutrient neutrality mitigation strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First question from me concerns the data which we find in paragraph 3.5 on the HDT results that we delivered in 2022, 2019 to 2022, only 38% of the housing required. This is a deterioration from the previous state, I believe. Why are we deteriorating? Why is it getting worse?
It's the reasons that are set out. It's the pandemic, it's nutrient neutrality, it's the lack of land supply and poor viability.
And so since we're through the worst of the COVID epidemic, since we are through the worst of the nitrate problem, would you expect us to be able to improve on the 2019 to 2022 figures?
I would love to say yes, but actually the housing figures for that finished in between 22 and 23 included the demolitions of Horatio and Leamington houses, and so our figures for that year were really, really down. But that was a quirk, and when the new flats get developed, our housing supply, our housing completions will go up again. But with nutrient neutrality sorted for now, so that we can grant planning permission, and the pandemic, well, whether it's gone away for good or whether we're back to pre-pandemic standards, housing completions aren't hampered in the way that they were during the pandemic. But we're never going to build a huge number of homes in Portsmouth, so what we need to do is get the target down. We need to get the supply up and the target down. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can get the target down possibly, but to get the supply up is going to be a real challenge. Councillor Dent?
Just one. With all these projected new properties being put in Portsmouth, has we been in contact with Southern Water on whether the sewer system we got, which is not coping at the moment, are going to cope with all the new properties?
Yeah, Southern Water, we have been working with them as we have been working with them on our plan. They commented on the Regulation 19 plan. We have worked so that they're happy with our policies, particularly on sustainable urban drainage system. It certainly is an issue for the city, and it's an issue that we are all working on. Our drainage system, you know, we have shared sewerage system, and so with storm events, the pipes overflow. But that is something we're all working on together.
Okay. Councillor Smythe?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an interesting paper and it's quite detailed, but I have read it several times and I don't have any more particular questions. I mean, the questions I asked for on the previous paper to some extent touch on this one anyway. I mean, I do think we have high hopes of the new plan, particularly if we get the lower target agreed. And, you know, with so many of the housing developments that are in the plan have already got some sort of planning permission or a presumption, a strong presumption for development. I mean, I'm reassured that we have taken precautions to make sure it's a realistic target and that we can achieve it. But developing in Portsmouth isn't that easy, as was pointed out to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No more questions. I note the report. It is a very comprehensive report. It's very well put together, and I think it will prove very useful. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 5, which is the Bird Aware Revised Strategy. Page 71 of your papers. Lucy, you are introducing the Bird Aware Revised Strategy.
I am indeed. So this is asking for you to approve rather than to note the revised Bird Aware Strategy and the financial model. It's already been adopted by the PUSH Joint Committee on the 30th of September, and it's now for individual local planning authorities to approve. The original strategy just dealt with overwintering birds, but the revised strategy now deals with summer breeding birds. There are quite a few changes, so the strategy extends from 2034 to 2050. The in perpetuity period extends from 2114 to 2130. The rangers, the Bird Aware rangers, will be working on site the year round. The core staff will be increased from 10 to 19, and there will be increased resourcing for the coast and canine, coast and country canines. There's also increased budget for comms and monitoring, and in terms of financial review, there's no need to change the payment schedule, which is good news for all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. My first question concerns the extent of this strategy. It obviously covers Portsmouth and most of the area around the Solent. How deep inland does this strategy work? How far deep inland do they have to be bird aware?
5.6 kilometres.
5.6 kilometres.
Yeah, that was the area calculated to. There were a lot of surveys done, and that was the average distance that people were said to travel to the coast for a walk.
Right. My second question concerns the fees which have been set. You noted that they have not really been increased as we've moved to all year, but they will go up by inflation. What measure of inflation is used?
Councillor, is it not in the report?
I was looking at the table on page 97 of where it is just a note, annual inflationary increases will continue as usual.
Mhm.
And so I'm not quite sure how these are calculated.
So it will be one of the price indexes, of course. If you're happy, Sarah, I will provide you that outside the meeting. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Smythe.
What paragraph is it? This seems to be a very useful scheme. It applies to all new developments. That is correct, isn't it?
New developments that create an overnight stay.
Yes, new developments are taken overnight stay. Have you got an estimate? I think it's certainly implied, if it isn't stated in here, how much of this mitigation is required because of dog ownership, and how much just by human beings walking on their own?
I think a substantial amount is caused by dogs, which is why we have the Coast and Canine scheme. Dogs like chasing birds, so there needs to be a lot of education to keep your dog on a lead when you are walking along the coast.
Are there any proposals nationally to try and regain some of this funding from dog licences then, or is that something that is unlikely to happen?
I don't know of any. I think it would be a very complicated thing to do.
And just lastly, do the existing team find that dog owners are amenable to suggestions that their dogs don't actually disturb birds in these categories?
It does appear to be very successful. The messages do seem to be getting through. I mean, I think there are always dog owners who will ignore advice and requests. But on the whole, I think through education, people are learning to keep their dogs on a lead and not to let them off onto the beaches.
I think this is quite a significant thing, given the increase in dog ownership that we've apparently seen. I believe there's a huge figure for that, and I think this is a good thing that we can adopt this, and that indeed it's been agreed collectively with a number of councils, with the staff doing that, and I wish them every success in controlling those dogs and dog owners that are creating the problems for wildlife and these rare birds.
I can see a petition coming on for reintroducing of dog licences. Councillor Dent? No? Right. It's necessary to approve this, and I am therefore prepared to approve this as it stands. And I think, from what I know, every other council which has looked at it has approved it. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much for the courtesy shown to the chair. And that is the end of the day's business.